The autumn sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Riverside Café, casting golden patterns across the worn wooden tables. Sarah Mitchell stood behind the counter, her apron dusted with flour from the morning's baking. At 32, life had taught her that dreams don't always unfold as planned, but that didn't make them any less precious. Her daughter, Emma, sat at a corner table, carefully coloring in her picture book. The little girl's blonde hair caught the light as she worked, her small tongue peeking out in concentration. At 4 years old, Emma had her mother's gentle spirit and an imagination that sometimes worried Sarah with its vividness. The cafe wasn't much, but it was theirs. Sarah had built this place from nothing after Emma's father left when she was just a baby. Every table, every cup of coffee served, represented her determination to give her daughter a stable life. The bell above the door chimed softly. Sarah looked up from wiping the counter and felt her breath catch. The man who entered carried himself with quiet confidence. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and he wore a tailored navy coat over a charcoal sweater. Everything about him spoke of a world far removed from her small cafe. This was Daniel Crawford, though Sarah didn't know it yet. At 38, he had built Crawford Industries from the ground up, earning his first million before 30. But success had come at a cost. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost touch with the simple moments that made life meaningful. He'd been driving through this neighborhood, escaping a suffocating board meeting, when he spotted the cafe. Something about its warmth had drawn him in. "Good afternoon," Sarah said, finding her voice. "What can I get for you?" Daniel approached the counter, and that's when he heard it. A small voice, clear as a bell and filled with wonder. "Mommy! Mommy, that's him!" Emma had dropped her crayons and was standing on her chair, one small hand pointing directly at Daniel. Her eyes were wide with recognition, her face glowing with an innocent certainty that stopped both adults in their tracks. Sarah rushed to her daughter's side. "Emma, sweetie, that's not polite." "We don't point at people." But Emma wasn't listening. She scrambled down from her chair and walked straight toward Daniel, her white sneakers padding softly on the floor. She stopped just in front of him, tilting her head back to look up at his face. "You're the man from my dream," she said simply. Daniel stood frozen. He'd attended countless high-stakes meetings, negotiated million-dollar deals without flinching, but this tiny girl's words had completely disarmed him. "Emma!" Sarah hurried over, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry. She's been having these very vivid dreams lately, and it's all right," Daniel said softly. He crouched down to Emma's level, something he couldn't remember ever doing with a child before. "Tell me about your dream." Emma's face lit up. "You were teaching me to fly a kite!" It was red and yellow, and it went really high. "And you were smiling, and you called me princess." The cafe seemed to hold its breath. Sarah's hand went to her mouth. I don't understand. She's been talking about this dream for 3 days. A man with dark hair and kind eyes, teaching her to fly a kite in a park." Daniel felt something shift inside his chest, a sensation both uncomfortable and oddly right. He'd spent years building walls around his heart after his own painful past. His parents had pushed him toward success, but never taught him about connection. His one serious relationship had ended when his fiancée told him he was married to his work. "I haven't flown a kite in 30 years, he said quietly, still looking at Emma. "My grandfather taught me when I was about your age." "Maybe you should again," Emma said with the profound simplicity only children possess. Over the following hour, something unexpected happened. Daniel ordered coffee and stayed. Sarah brought him a slice of her homemade apple pie, and they talked. Emma colored at his table, occasionally looking up at him with that same certain recognition. Daniel learned that Sarah had been running the cafe for 5 years, that she'd taken out a loan she was still paying off, that Emma loved stories about birds and wanted to be a teacher when she grew up. Sarah learned that Daniel had lost both his parents the previous year, that his company was successful but his life felt empty, that he couldn't remember the last time he'd had a genuine conversation. "Why did you really come in here?" Sarah asked as the afternoon light began to fade. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. I was driving thinking about selling my company, walking away from everything. I felt so tired of it all. He glanced at Emma, who was showing him her drawing of a kite. Then I saw your cafe and something told me to stop. Sarah refilled his coffee cup, her hand steady despite her racing heart. And now? Now I'm wondering if sometimes we're guided to exactly where we need to be. Over the next several weeks, Daniel became a regular at Riverside Café. He'd arrive in the afternoons, after his meetings, and sit at that same corner table. He helped Emma with her drawings, listened to Sarah's stories about her customers, and slowly began to remember what it felt like to be simply human rather than constantly striving. He learned that kindness wasn't weakness, that success without connection was hollow, and that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was allow themselves to be vulnerable. Sarah, for her part, learned to trust again. She'd built such strong walls after Emma's father left, convincing herself that she and her daughter were fine on their own. Daniel's gentle presence reminded her that accepting help wasn't failure and that love could arrive unexpectedly, wearing a tailored coat and carrying decades of its own lonely lessons. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel arrived at the cafe carrying a package. Emma squealed with delight when he opened it. Inside was a red and yellow kite. I thought, he said, looking between Sarah and Emma, that maybe it was time to make that dream come true. They drove to Riverside Park, all three of them. The autumn wind was perfect for kite flying. Daniel showed Emma how to hold the string, how to run until the kite caught the breeze, how to feel the pull of something beautiful taking flight. Sarah watched them together, her heart full of a hope she'd thought she'd lost. Emma's laughter rang across the park, and when Daniel called her princess, just as she'd said in her dream, tears slipped down Sarah's cheeks. That evening, as they sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Daniel took Sarah's hand. I don't believe in fate, he said quietly. I've always believed we make our own way. But your daughter knew me before we met. How do you explain that? Sarah smiled, watching Emma chase falling leaves. Maybe some souls recognize each other. Maybe Emma's heart knew what mine was afraid to hope for. And what was that? That somewhere out there, someone kind and good was finding his way to us. Daniel pulled them both close, these two people who had changed everything. He'd come to that cafe a millionaire but a poor man in all the ways that mattered. Now, surrounded by their warmth, he finally understood true wealth. Emma looked up at both of them, her small face serious. I told you he was real, Mommy. You did, sweetheart. You absolutely did. As the three of them walked back to the car, Daniel carrying Emma on his shoulders while she held the kite string, Sarah thought about all the twists and turns that had led them here. The heartbreak, the struggle, the lonely nights wondering if she'd made the right choices. But watching Daniel and Emma together, seeing the gentleness in this powerful man as he learned to open his heart, she understood. Sometimes we have to walk through darkness to fully appreciate the light. Sometimes we have to lose our way to find our true path. And sometimes, just sometimes, a child's dream can show us all the way home.